Welcome to Bethlem Museum of the Mind's virtual book club for June 2020, in which we're promoting the reading of the book 10 Madnesses by the artist Fiona Tan. If you don't yet have a copy of this book, you can still watch this video. I'll do my best to avoid any major spoilers. And if you have a UK address, there's still time for you to contact the museum to find details or how you can order your own copy of the book for £16.50, postage and packing included. Just email us at info@motm.org.uk. This is the first in a series of 4 videos we're going to release on our YouTube channel every Tuesday and on our Facebook account as well, from now until the end of June, to add to the short one we used to promote this book club at the end of last month. To participate in the book club, all you need to do is post comments on the museum's social media. The discussion there will be as active as our community of readers will make it. To try to avoid spoilers, I'll start by talking not about the book, I'll circle back to the book later, but about the statue that I'm standing next to, which reclined above the gates of Bethlem Hospital in London from 1676, when it was carved by the sculptor Caius Gabriel Cibber, until 1815. It is one of a pair, and if you've seen the short promotional video which preceded this one, you'll already have been introduced to its cousin, which was dubbed Raving Madness. This week, by contrast, I'm in the company of so-called Melancholy Madness. These names suggest that the statues were sculpted to depict the binary distinction used in the 17th and 18th centuries to distinguish between 2 sets of differing mental health conditions. As such, they're important, thought-provoking, and challenging exhibits for a museum of the mind like ours. From time to time, the statues have travelled to support major exhibitions on the history of the representation of the so-called insane, to Vienna, to Berlin, to Paris, and most recently in 2013 and 2014 to Frankfurt and Ghent for an exhibition entitled Theodore Géricault, Images of Life and Death. So here is where we make the link between these statues and the book 10 Madnesses. Not that Cibber's statues are mentioned by Fiona Tan in her book, but that this exhibition in Frankfurt and Ghent also featured 4 of the 5 19th century portraits of so-called monomania on which her book is based. The paintings were by the French artist Theodore Géricault, and here is a spoiler alert for what you're going to read on page 25 if you haven't already. The book is called 10 Madnesses because, to add to the 5 that survive, there are said to have been another 5 whose whereabouts are unknown. The 19th century was a period of growing sophistication and classification on the part of the medical profession, in France, in Britain and elsewhere, in the observation of the mentally ill. Rather than being content to continue to rely on the catch-all categories of mania and melancholia that are dramatised by Cibber's statues, doctors began to distinguish between different kinds of mania at that time. Puerperal mania, for example, mania without delirium, and monomania, as well as to identify a range of subcategories of monomania and the others. Some of these subcategories are reflected in the titles to Géricault's paintings, as we'll see as we read through Fiona Tan's book. But there never was a time when there was a static list of just 10 monomanias. The Bethlem physician Alexander Morrison wrote books on mental health diagnostics, which went through several editions in the first half of the 19th century. And with each successive edition, the proposed taxonomy of mental disease became more intricate. Morrison himself was no artist, but he commissioned artists to draw and paint portraits of his own patients at Bethlem and elsewhere to illustrate his books. In the videos in the weeks to come, I'll be drawing attention to a couple of these Bethlem patients, at the same time as discussing those painted by Géricault. But for the moment, I want to draw attention to an entry at the very end of the second edition of Morrison's Physiognomy of Mental Diseases, published in 1843. The illustration on page 270 features not one of Morrison's patients, but melancholy madness here, which by this time had been taken down from Bethlem's gateposts and placed inside the hospital. Morrison knew the statue well, but treated it not so much as a work of art, as an expression of the physiognomy of insanity. On page 271, his medical instincts kicked in and he started constructing a diagnosis for the statue. This has been generally considered to be a representation of melancholy insanity, he wrote. If, however, it be attentively examined, I think it must be referred to the variety termed dementia. That state in which the symptoms of melancholy previously existing have now disappeared, and deprivation of intellect and of mental energy has gradually succeeded. The extreme childlike attitude is natural, and with the tongue protruding from the mouth, is characteristic of total absence of mind. Behind what Morrison writes here lies the fact that the names that have traditionally been assigned to the Bethlem statues, raving and melancholy madness, were not given them by the sculptor or by the hospital at the time they were installed. These names came to be associated with the statues at some later point in a way that has not been fully documented. They were the result of people putting words to what they saw, and disagreement between people about what there was to see was perhaps inevitable, as the example of Morrison illustrates. Fiona Tan writes early on in her book that mental illness is surprisingly difficult to visualize, that it reveals itself in abnormal behavior, usually only apparent over the course of time, and that it is not easily portrayed by still images. She also writes that representations of madness say a lot about what we consider normal and acceptable, about who we think we are and who we feel we should be. In the first 25 pages of 10 Madnesses, Fiona Tan writes with particular reference to her favourite of Géricault's 5 paintings, Portrait of a Kleptomaniac. This portrait features in the titles at the start of this video by kind permission of the Museum of Fine Art in Ghent, Belgium, where the portrait now hangs, and which was one of the venues for the Images of Life and Death exhibition that I mentioned earlier. In this picture, Tan sees a man for whom the world no longer makes any sense, and she seems to attribute this to Géricault's careful observation and to his ability to paint what he sees and feels directly and without pretense. Later on in the book, however, Tan will come on to discuss the effect the attributed title of the portrait has on how we see it, how we arm ourselves with the information in the title and then see what we want or we expect to see. This raises the question of how we might have seen this portrait differently and the others if they had all been untitled, and if we knew nothing about the sitters. So in preparation for next week, when the next video in this series will be released on the museum's YouTube channel and Facebook account, I recommend you keep reading 10 Madnesses from page 25 or wherever you got up to, up until the end of page 48, and I look forward to you joining us next week. Goodbye for now.